Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into a time that makes your worst Monday look like a spa day. The Gilded Age, when being poor meant living in a world more glamorous on the outside than your neighbor's Instagram vacation, and about as cozy as a subway bench in February. Get ready to trade your memory foam mattress for a lumpy boarding house cot, your morning latte for yesterday's cold oatmeal, and your job complaints for 12-hour shifts with a side of tuberculosis. Before you drift off into this gilded nightmare, hit like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment telling me what century you're currently trying to fall asleep in, but only if you actually enjoy this. If not, feel free to just enjoy my voice as background noise while you forget to pay your 21st century bills. Now, dim those lights, cue up your favorite fan app, and wriggle around until you're more comfortable than a factory worker's lunch break. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it was really like to be broke in a world obsessed with being rich? Did Gilded Age landlords come with more personality than your printer at work? How do you wash your one set of clothes when running water is for millionaires? What do you eat for breakfast when eggs cost more than your rent? Could you survive a tenement with 20 people and 3 working teeth between them? Would you last 1 week sleeping over a saloon with rats so large you need to pay them rent? And how, exactly, does one manage workplace safety in a factory where the safety first sign is just a suggestion? Congratulations. You've just woken up in New York City, 1887. The rich are hosting parties with diamond napkin rings. The poor are arguing with pigeons over bread crusts. And you've already stepped in something unspeakable on the sidewalk. Good luck. It's sunrise in your 5-story walk-up. And the first thing you notice isn't the light, it's the smell. There's a certain fragrance to a Gilded Age tenement, a blend of coal dust, cabbage, and the collective hopes of 12 families sharing one bathroom. You wake up wedged between your siblings, wondering if today's the day the bedbugs unionize. The air is thick and sour, the kind of dense humidity that manages to be both sticky and cold at the same time. A real achievement, even by 1887 standards. Somewhere nearby, a pipe hisses and rattles, threatening to burst but never quite finding the motivation. You'd check on it, but moving means climbing over your brother, your sister, and possibly your Aunt Mildred, who fell asleep on your cot after her late shift. Family togetherness. Forced, fragrant, and only slightly dangerous. Your bed is a marvel of ergonomic discomfort, a mattress in theory, but in practice, a thin, lumpy mat over bed springs that could double as a musical instrument in a less cruel universe. The springs creak in protest as you attempt to shift your weight without triggering a small avalanche of arms, legs, and stray elbows. You'd like to stretch, but last time you tried that, you woke up your uncle, 2 cousins, and a small dog no one admits to owning. As your eyes adjust to the weak morning light filtering in through the sooty window, you get a good look at your sleeping arrangements. Privacy is a legend whispered about in other neighborhoods. Here, your entire family is assembled in an arrangement that could best be described as human lasagna. Layers upon layers of relatives, all snoring in harmony. If you want personal space, you'll have to wait until everyone leaves for work or the landlord evicts you, whichever comes first. Getting up without waking everyone else is a stealth mission. You roll to the edge of the mattress, carefully disengaging yourself from your youngest sibling's vice-like grip. You step onto the icy wooden floorboards, instantly regretting every life choice that led to owning only 1 pair of socks, both with more holes than fabric. The chill shoots straight up your legs, reminding you that insulation is for the rich and possibly for buildings not designed by people with a grudge against comfort. You stagger toward the window, dodging shoes, a half-eaten potato, and what you sincerely hope is just a pile of old laundry. The window is crusted over with a delightful mixture of city soot and last night's condensation. You take a deep breath, crack it open, and immediately regret it. The fresh city air brings a new bouquet. Horses, smoke, and the distant promise of more cabbage. You close the window and promise yourself you'll try again in spring. The tenement is already awake in its own way. From the hallway, you hear the thud of feet, the shriek of a neighbor who just discovered the plumbing is frozen again, and the cheerful bellow of Mrs. Kowalski yelling at her children in 3 languages. Somewhere above you, a baby is wailing, and below, someone's coughing like they're auditioning for a tuberculosis pamphlet. Bathroom? It's down the hall, shared by the entire floor, already occupied and haunted by the ghost of questionable plumbing decisions. If you want to wash your face, you queue up behind your neighbor, who's either brushing his teeth or washing his socks in the same basin. There's no hot water, just a tin cup chained to the sink and a cracked mirror that reflects back the collective exhaustion of everyone on your floor. You splash cold water on your face and look around. This is your life. Crowded, noisy, drafty, and oddly comforting in its routine. You grab your shirt, still damp from last night's wash, and pull it on, ready to begin another day of survival, hustle, and the hope that tonight, maybe, the bedbugs will take a holiday. Welcome to the Gilded Age, where every morning begins with the question, what will you step in first? And will today be the day you finally find out who the dog belongs to? Your morning bathroom routine involves negotiating with your neighbor for first dibs at the communal sink, which is basically a cold, leaky pipe in the hallway. If you want warm water, that's extra. If you want privacy, try again in the next century. Let's set the scene. You shuffle out of your tenement room, hair stuck at improbable angles, clutching your battered tin cup and a sliver of soap so thin it's practically a suggestion. You step into the hallway, which is already alive with the sounds of clashing languages, a crying baby, and Mrs. Romano swearing at the sink for being colder than her mother-in-law. The communal bathroom isn't a bathroom so much as a philosophical debate about the concept of hygiene. It's a single toilet, missing a seat, naturally, and one long rusty pipe with a spigot that alternates between dripping and impersonating a small waterfall. But never when you actually need it to. There's a line, as always. You find yourself sandwiched between Mr. Petrov, who bathes once a week, with alarming enthusiasm, and a child clutching a toothbrush like it's a weapon. Negotiations begin in earnest. Who gets the first bucket of water before it runs brown? Whose turn is it to unclog the drain with a borrowed broom handle? Did anyone remember to bring newspaper to stand on, so your socks don't soak up a mysterious puddle? These are questions that separate survivors from optimists. When your turn finally arrives, you claim your spot at the sink, a narrow slab of porcelain that's seen more trauma than most Civil War veterans. The water, true to form, is Arctic cold, and the pressure is a gamble. You splash your face, gasping as the chill hits like a debt collector, and scrub with that wafer of soap. Maybe you try to brush your teeth, if you can find a cup that isn't already claimed by someone else's questionable dental hygiene. Want warm water? That's a 2-step process. You either boil it yourself, carefully rationing coal, because who wants to burn next week's dinner, or you pay Mrs. D'Angelo's teenage son a few cents for the privilege of using his borrowed kettle. The catch: he's already using it to heat up water for the next 6 families, so get in line and hope you make it to work before lunch. If you're after true privacy, forget it. The hallway is a never-ending parade of people. Children in nightshirts, old men muttering about the price of eggs, a distant uncle wandering in from another building because the water pressure feels luckier here. The only solitude you find is in the split second before your sibling pounds on the door demanding you hurry up because their emergency apparently outranks yours. For those feeling especially ambitious, Today's the day you attempt a full wash. This is not a bath. This is a strategic 3-minute scrubbing of pits, face, and anywhere that won't get you reported for indecency. You're armed with a washcloth, a slosh of water, and enough shame to power the city's streetlights. The result? You emerge only slightly cleaner, chilled to the bone, and with a lingering suspicion that you've just moved the grime around for future archaeologists to study. To dry off, you wave your hands in the air, share a frayed towel with 3 other people, or, if you're truly desperate, stand near the kitchen stove until your hair stops dripping. If you're lucky, no one has used your shirt as a mop for last night's stew disaster. As you finish up, you give the sink a respectful nod, return the tin cup to its spot on the communal shelf, and step back into the living room, where, miraculously, everyone looks just as haggard as you. In the Gilded Age, morning routines aren't about wellness or ritual. They're about survival, negotiation, and developing a healthy respect for the phrase, "you missed a spot." Another day begins, and you're mostly clean, mostly awake, and ready to do it all again tomorrow. Or at least, ready to pretend. Breakfast is served. A bowl of yesterday's oatmeal, recycled from the pot that doubles as a foot warmer. If you're lucky, you'll get a slice of bread hard enough to double as a weapon. And coffee so thin you wonder if it's just dirty water with ambition. The day's first meal is less rise and shine and more endure and chew. You sit at a rickety table surrounded by the half-awake members of your family, each bundled up in mismatched layers to fend off the chill that clings to the tenement's walls. Your mother doles out portions of oatmeal with the solemnity of a priest handing out communion, scraping the bottom of the pot for anything that hasn't already fused with yesterday's batch. In the Gilded Age, leftovers aren't a treat. They're a lifestyle. The more creative your palate, the more edible breakfast becomes. You eye your portion with the caution of someone who's already bitten down on a rogue pebble or two. Oatmeal, in theory, is nutritious. In practice, it's a beige sludge that has absorbed every flavor in the communal kitchen, cabbage from dinner, coal from the stove, and an undertone of mystery that can only be described as Tuesday. Sometimes there's a lucky surprise. A shriveled raisin, an unidentifiable seed, or, if fortune smiles upon you, a thin wisp of brown sugar snuck in from a neighbor's cupboard. The real jackpot? Butter. But no one in your building has seen butter since last Christmas, and you suspect the last part is being used as a family heirloom. As you spoon up the first bite, the texture does its best to lower your expectations. It's sticky, lumpy, and just a little bit colder than your toes. Your sibling across the table attempts to soften a crust of bread by dunking it in coffee, only to watch it stubbornly resist both liquid and logic. The bread, lovingly referred to as the loaf, doubles as a paperweight and a self-defense tool. You gnaw at the corner, careful not to crack a tooth. Dentist visits are reserved for emergencies, miracles, and people with actual money. Let's talk about coffee. Gilded Age coffee is less a beverage and more a philosophical exercise. How much flavor can you coax from a handful of used grounds, some hot water, and a healthy dose of hope? It's served from a battered tin pot that predates the tenement itself. The liquid inside is the color of regret and tastes only slightly more invigorating than the dishwater that inspired it. Cream and sugar are for the rich. You're grateful if your cup is mostly grit-free. Breakfast conversation is as sparse as the menu. The adults murmur about rent, jobs, and the latest rumors of a soup kitchen opening 2 blocks away. Children barter over who gets the slightly less burned slice of bread. Someone mentions hearing that the O'Learys in 3B managed to buy an egg, 1 egg, for 6 people. It's the Gilded Age version of winning the lottery. And you try not to feel envious as you contemplate the nutritional value of licking the oatmeal pot clean. If you're extra, unlucky. Today is the day the milk went off. In the rare case there is milk, it's usually sour by morning, having spent the night flirting with room temperature. Some families bravely pour it over their oatmeal anyway. Others consider it extra flavor. In a world before refrigerators, dairy is a game of Russian roulette, and the only guarantee is a slightly upset stomach. You finish your breakfast with a sense of grim accomplishment, scraping every last bit from your bowl. The table is cleared, usually by feeding the leftover crusts to the sparrows on the windowsill, or, more likely, to the ever-hopeful resident mouse. No one lingers, there's work to be done, and the oatmeal pot needs to be emptied, refilled, and set back by the stove, ready to serve as tomorrow's breakfast and tonight's foot warmer. So you set down your tin cup, wipe your hands on your patched trousers, and prepare to face another day. You're fueled not by nutrients or caffeine, but by the sheer force of will that got you through yesterday's meal and will hopefully get you through whatever culinary challenge awaits tomorrow. In the Gilded Age, breakfast is less about starting your day and more about surviving it. You pull on the only shirt you own, still damp from last night's attempt at laundering it in a bucket. It's less of a fashion statement and more of a warning label. Nothing says morning in the Gilded Age like the feel of cold, rough cotton against your skin. You wiggle into your shirt with the resigned determination of someone about to wrestle an alligator, cautious, slightly fearful, and certain that someone will come away with scratches. The fabric offers all the comfort of a sack of potatoes and half the flexibility. Every seam rubs in just the wrong place, as if your shirt has a personal vendetta against your armpits. You tell yourself you'll get used to it, but your skin knows better. Next up, your trousers. They're not really yours, they belong to someone else. First, maybe a cousin, maybe a stranger who outgrew them in 1874. There's a patched knee and a patch on the patch, which gives the whole garment a quilted effect. You button them up, feeling the satisfying crunch of starched fabric that refuses to bend. If you're lucky, there's a belt. If not, a bit of string and wishful thinking hold things together. Socks, if you own any, are more like lacework by now, wholly enough for your toes to stage a breakout. One sock is perpetually damp, the other is mysteriously crunchy, and both are determined to migrate down into your shoe with every step. You pause for a moment and consider going barefoot, but last week's splinter incident is still fresh in your memory. Shoes are another adventure. Maybe they're leather, cracked and stiff, or maybe they're canvas, with one side wearing thin enough to feel the sidewalk through. If you have laces, you treasure them, because a good lace can outlast 3 pairs of shoes and a small fire. Each shoe is an archive of the city's history. Mud, street dust, a hint of last winter's coal ash, and the lingering aroma of wet basement. Your jacket, such as it is, once aspired to greatness. Maybe it was part of a suit in a previous life, now demoted to everyday armor against cold winds and judgmental glances. The lining is a memory, the pockets are frayed, and every button is a survivor of some long-forgotten buttoning emergency. You shrug it on and instantly feel a draft down your back, as if the fabric is reminding you that in the Gilded Age, insulation is mostly a rumor. You consider accessories, but that's mostly theoretical. Maybe you have a scarf knitted by a relative with more enthusiasm than yarn, its ends unraveling by the day. Or maybe you have a cap, soft and sagging, bearing witness to years of being pulled over cold ears and windswept hair. Gloves, if you have them, are fingerless, their original purpose long since abandoned for warmth over aesthetics. Now, for the pièce de résistance, undergarments. If you have any, you're a rare breed, and they're probably so threadbare you wonder if they count as clothing or just positive thinking. Modesty isn't about coverage so much as the ability to layer as much fabric as possible between yourself and the cold reality of industrial city life. With each added layer, you become less of a person and more of a soft, moving heap of laundry. You move awkwardly, feeling the seams and wrinkles pinch in new and surprising places. There's no such thing as outfit of the day. It's just outfit, singular, forever, until it gives up or you grow out of it. You give yourself a quick once-over in the cracked mirror, taking in the full effect. Fashion is not the goal, survival is. If your clothes stay mostly on your body and don't catch fire, you're winning. As you step outside, the city wind cuts right through you, and you pull your jacket tighter, grateful for every stubborn thread. You join the parade of fellow tenement dwellers, all bundled in their own mismatched layers of lamentation, each of you wearing your struggles, quite literally, on your sleeves. In the Gilded Age, getting dressed is less about looking good and more about staying covered, staying warm, and hoping the neighbors are too polite to mention the smell. Making it from your room to the street means dodging your neighbor's laundry, someone's sleeping uncle, and at least 3 mysterious puddles you don't want to identify. If you make it outside without stepping in something alive, you win the daily lottery. You start your journey at your own door, clutching your lunch pail and steeling yourself for the daily obstacle course that is the communal hallway. The door doesn't so much open as it groans, announcing your departure to anyone within a 3-room radius. Immediately, you're met with the unmistakable sight of Mrs. Kowalski's bloomers dangling overhead, dripping last. Nights wash onto the floorboards like an experimental weather system. You sidestep, but the moisture finds you anyway, trailing down your sleeve and instantly lowering your mood by 5 degrees. To your left, Mr. Sullivan is asleep on a threadbare cot parked squarely in the middle of the corridor, blocking half the footpath. He's snoring with the dedication of a professional, his cap pulled low and his boots left neatly at the foot of the bed. A rare show of organization in a building that thrives on chaos. You know better than to wake him. Last time someone tried, he launched into a story about fighting raccoons in the Navy, and everyone missed breakfast. You tiptoe around his boots, only to be confronted with the first of the day's puddles. Is it water from a leaky roof? Soup from Mrs. Romano's dinner disaster? Something created in the mind of a malicious trickster spirit. You decide not to dwell on it, practicing the timeless tenement skill of polite avoidance. You leap, land safely, and tell yourself you'll disinfect your shoes later, again. Ahead, the hallway narrows as someone's entire wardrobe is draped over the banister. There are shirts in shades of brown, grey, and formally white, each with a story and at least one missing button. You brush past them, picking up the scent of lye soap and regret, and try to avoid getting snagged on a stray clothespin. On your right, the McCarthy children are playing stickball with an old potato and an enthusiasm that defies the hour. You duck as the ball whizzes past your ear, ricochets off a wall, and somehow lands in a basket of someone's freshly folded linens. The children scatter, the baby starts to cry, and you quicken your pace before you're recruited as a referee. The staircase looms ahead, a rickety collection of uneven steps that seem to shift slightly underfoot. You grip the handrail, which is sticky for reasons you will never, ever investigate, and make your descent. Behind you, someone is singing in Italian, and in front, someone else is loudly negotiating rent with the landlord, by which you mean arguing about who left the dead mouse in the stairwell. The commotion echoes up and down, merging into the daily soundtrack of tenement life, laughter, arguments, and the distant, hopeful ring of a bell from the bakery across the street. The final stretch is the ground floor, where the smells of last night's fish fry meet the morning's coal smoke and combine in a unique fragrance the city health department refuses to classify. You step over a cat. Maybe it's a cat. Sidestep another puddle and exchange a nod with Old Man Levy, who's already halfway through his second cigar of the day and offers weather updates whether you want them or not. At last, you reach the front door, paint peeling, hinges clinging to life, and a small pile of unread mail pushed into the corner. You brace yourself, push it open, and step onto the bustling city street. Fresh air, well, fresher than the hallway, hits your face. You take a deep breath, marvel at your survival, and check your shoes for unexpected passengers. Congratulations. You've navigated the hallway gauntlet with all your toes intact and only minor dampness on your cuffs. Out here, the world is yours, at least until you have to go back inside for lunch. In the Gilded Age, even leaving your own home is an adventure, and you never know what you'll step in next. The factory whistle shrieks before dawn, summoning you and every other hopeful soul to another day of industrial excitement. Your job? Doing the work of a small, caffeinated octopus with machinery so dangerous it might just eat your lunch and your left hand. You shuffle into line with 100 others, all of you bundled in threadbare jackets, eyes half shut, breath steaming in the cold morning air. The factory stands ahead, a brick and steel monolith belching black smoke against the pale sunrise. You could romanticize it, call it the heartbeat of progress. But the truth is, it looks like a place built specifically to discourage optimism. Someone coughs behind you. Someone else mutters about the foreman. You all drift forward, drawn by the siren call of wages and the threat of losing your spot if you hesitate. Once inside, the world becomes a symphony of grinding gears, shouting supervisors, and the relentless clatter of metal on metal. The air is thick with dust and the pungent scent of hot oil. You find your post. A rickety stool wedged between two endlessly churning machines that have seen more repairs than a Civil War veteran. There are rules, of course: no loose clothing, no horseplay, and, most importantly, never, under any circumstances, fall asleep on the job. That last one is enforced with the subtlety of a brick. Nod off, and you'll wake up to a shout and possibly a missing finger. Your task is simple in theory and impossible in practice. Feed bolts into a press, align the widgets, and keep everything moving at a parsiple in practice. Pace designed by someone with no concern for the limitations of human bone or muscle. The machine doesn't care about your aching shoulders, your cold, numbed fingers, or your urge to sneeze. It's a hungry beast, and it wants to be fed. A moment's hesitation, and the rhythm is thrown off. A jammed widget, a missed bolt, and suddenly the foreman is there, looming behind you, ready to dock your pay for slacking. You nod, apologize, and promise to do better, all while desperately hoping your sleeve doesn't catch. All around you, the factory is alive with danger. Sparks fly from a welding station, drifting down like hot fireflies. Somewhere down the line, you hear a shout. Someone got a little too close to the gears. The foreman rushes over, and within moments, the unlucky soul is shuffled away, clutching a bloodied rag. There's a pause, a collective intake of breath, and then the work resumes. In the Gilded Age, the line between worker and work-related incident is thin, and everyone knows it. Lunch break is a fleeting luxury, a short pause in the relentless march of widgets and cogs. You sit on a crate, wolfing down a chunk of bread and a sliver of cheese, if you're lucky. The room echoes with tired jokes. whispered rumors of someone's cousin who found a safer job, and quiet calculations about whether you can make it until payday without pawning your boots. There's camaraderie here, a kind of grim humor that comes from surviving together. You swap stories about close calls and legendary mishaps. The time someone's lunch got caught in the press, or the day old Tommy tried to fix the belt drive with chewing gum. Tommy's fine, mostly. The gum, less so. When the whistle finally blares again, it's back to the grind. By late afternoon, your arms feel like they've been through a wrestling match with a gorilla, and your shirt is streaked with oil, sweat, and a little bit of fear. The factory windows are fogged, filtering in grey daylight. Every now and then, you catch a glimpse of the outside world, kids playing stickball, vendors hawking roasted chestnuts, and for a moment, you remember there's life beyond the thrum of machines. Quitting time comes not with fanfare, but with another blast of the whistle, a mass exodus toward the door, and a silent vow to keep all your fingers another day. You head home, pockets slightly heavier, spirits only marginally so. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. In the Gilded Age, the factory isn't just where you work, it's where you risk, endure, and sometimes, if you're lucky, survive. If you think kids today have it rough, try being 7 and pulling a 12-hour shift threading bobbins in a sweatshop. You dream of recess but wake up to the gentle sound of your supervisor yelling about efficiency. Your workday begins at the hour when most children in the future will still be snuggled under covers, possibly negotiating for 5 more minutes of sleep. Not you. You're up with the first clang of the morning bell, cramming a heel of stale bread into your mouth, and making sure your shirt buttons, the 2 that are left, are roughly in the right holes. There's no waiting for a yellow school bus. Instead, you and a ragtag group of equally underslept, overworked children shuffle through the grey city streets, dodging piles of horse manure and the occasional surly dog who guards the alleyway shortcut. The factory looms ahead, dark and enormous, its windows clouded with steam and secrets. You're already an expert at slipping past the supervisor's glare, ducking under grown-up elbows, and finding your post at the long wooden workbench. Your kingdom? Bobbins, spools, and a mountain of tangled threads. The machinery is loud, thumping, whirring, occasionally shrieking like a banshee with a toothache. Your job is to keep the thread moving and the bobbins full, but mostly, your job is to stay out of the way and not get caught daydreaming. There's a rhythm to it, but it's not the rhythm of a skipping rope or a hopscotch game. It's a relentless beat of hands moving fast, eyes scanning for snags, and feet dangling above the dirty floor. Sometimes you think about your old life, before the family moved to the city, when your biggest problem was getting a grass stain out of your only pair of pants. Now, you measure time in lunch breaks and the number of times you hear your name barked in a tone that suggests disappointment. You're not alone, of course. The workroom is packed with children, some as young as 5, most no older than 12, each with a specialty. Threaders, sweepers, oilers, and those brave souls who climb inside the machines to clear a jam while the gears are still cooling. You swap stories on break, comparing bruises like trading cards. Billy claims he once saw a rat as big as a cat, and Mary boasts she can tie a knot with her toes. You all laugh, but quietly, because laughter wastes energy, and energy is for work. Lunch is short and unsatisfying. A cold potato, a sliver of cheese, maybe a shriveled apple if you're lucky, or your family's had a good week at the pawn shop. You eat sitting on a pile of discarded spools, trading bites and secrets, and hoping the supervisor's back stays turned. Someone sneaks a sip of water, someone else tries to nap with one eye open, and everyone dreads the shriek of the boss's whistle calling you back. The afternoon is a blur of aching fingers, burning eyes, and the constant awareness that you're one mistake away from losing more than your job. Accidents happen. Tiny hands move quickly but not always carefully, and sometimes a slip means a bruised knuckle or worse. But the real fear isn't physical pain. It's being too slow, earning a scolding, or worse, a pay cut. And yet, somehow, you keep going. You invent games in your head to make the hours pass. You count the knots in the wood, the teeth on a gear, the number of times the supervisor says efficiency in an hour. Your record is 17. When quitting time finally comes, you stumble outside, covered in lint and dust, and squint at the fading daylight. Your childhood is measured in spools and shifts, but you still dream of running, laughing, or maybe just having the day off. In the Gilded Age, childhood isn't about play. It's about survival, hustle, and hoping the future is softer than the world you've just worked through. And if you ever do get a day off, you'll know exactly how to spend it, sleeping until noon. Lunchtime is a windowless, rat-adjacent affair where you unwrap your bread, if you remembered to bring some, and try to ignore the smell of boiled cabbage wafting through the factory vents. A real power lunch, circa 1887. Your internal clock, honed by the steady rhythm of clanking gears and shouted orders, tells you when it's time for lunch. Not that there's a bell or a cheerful lunch lady, just a lull in the relentless pace, a small mercy doled out by the foreman who's probably just as hungry as you are. The machinery groans to a halt, and you rub your tired hands, grateful for a moment when the only thing at risk is indigestion. You shuffle with the crowd of fellow workers, kids, adults, and the occasional wide-eyed newcomer toward the designated break area. It's not so much an area as a gap between two machines, decorated with stray bolts and a persistent draft. You scout for a patch of floor that's less oily than the rest, only to find the resident factory rat already staking its claim with an air of smug seniority. You both agree to ignore each other, silent mutual respect. You settle onto a crate or the cool cement, shoulders hunched, and reach into your lunch pail. Today's menu, a wedge of bread that's mostly crust, and maybe, if you hit the jackpot, a slice of cheese wrapped in wax paper that's seen better centuries. The bread is tough, less fresh bakery and more historical artifact, so you gnaw at the corner, hoping your teeth are up for the challenge. There's no butter, no jam, just bread and determination. Around you, lunch unfolds in a choreography of modesty and strategy. Some swap bites. Half a potato for a bit of jerky, a pickled onion for a square inch of yesterday's turnip. One girl boasts a boiled egg. Her friends stare with reverence, as if she's brought the Hope Diamond. The conversations are soft and quick. How's your dad's cough? Did your sister get a spot at the school? Any news about the union? Always spoken in hushed tones, because the walls have ears, and, occasionally, those ears belong to management. The smell in the air is a complex soup of sweat, metal, and whatever the cook at the boarding house has chosen to incinerate for lunch. Today, it's cabbage, and it invades your senses, clinging to your clothes and settling in your hair. You breathe through your mouth, as much to avoid the aroma as to escape the taste of disappointment. If you forgot your lunch, maybe your family ran out of bread, maybe you just lost track. Today's nourishment is air and envy. Sometimes a friend shares a crust. Sometimes you just pretend you're not hungry. No one judges. Hunger is the most democratic thing in the room. Occasionally, the truly desperate try their luck with the mystery stew from a nearby alley vendor. But you've seen enough to know that mystery is not a flavor you can trust. For a few fleeting minutes, there's laughter, a joke about the foreman's mustache, a story about the street performer outside, someone humming a tune that almost drowns out the hum of distant machines. It's camaraderie born out of exhaustion and shared struggle, a collective pause before the relentless clockwork of the afternoon. You finish your bread, crumbs tumbling onto your lap and swiftly disappearing to the delight of the ever-watchful rat. You wipe your hands on your trousers, already stained from a dozen other meals. There's no time for dessert, no seconds, no coffee break, just a quick swallow of water from a battered tin cup, if you have one, then back to the grind. The foreman shouts, the machinery shudders to life, and lunch break is over. You return to your post, stomach half full, resolve slightly restored. In the Gilded Age, lunch isn't about luxury, it's about scraping by, holding on, and remembering that hope, like bread, goes a little further when you share it. And tomorrow, if you're lucky, you'll remember to pack an extra slice. Or at least, dream about it. In the Gilded Age, safety is mostly a rumor. Guards on machines are for the weak. If you manage to get through the day with all 10 fingers, congratulations. You're ahead of the curve and probably not getting a raise. Your workday begins with a quick scan for hazards. But that's mostly for sport. The real rule is keep your wits about you and never trust a machine that makes a humming sound. The factory floor is a labyrinth of spinning belts, gears, and wheels, each whirring with barely contained enthusiasm for mangling the inattentive. Warning signs are non-existent, unless you count the faded bloodstains near the press, or that one old guy missing 2 fingers who likes to tell cautionary tales while eating soup. Badly. No one hands you goggles or gloves. The only personal protective equipment you own is sheer panic and a sleeve you hope doesn't get sucked into a conveyor belt. Someone once heard about a machine guard, but it turned out to be a rumor started by the guy who invented fire escapes. The closest thing to safety training is the foreman's opening speech. Keep moving and don't be stupid. Inspiring stuff. Your first real lesson in occupational risk comes the second you try to fix a jammed machine. The method? Wiggle your fingers inside and pray the operator isn't running late from lunch. There's no lockout, tagout, just duck and hope. Occasionally, the machine spits out a bolt or a spring as a warning, like a bolt dog baring its teeth before it bites. Across the floor, Mary from row 3 wipes sweat from her brow and ducks under a moving pulley that's seen more close calls than a train conductor. Jimmy, the new kid, learned not to lean on the conveyor after a crate nearly carried him away to the packing department. The rest of you watch and learn. Sometimes with morbid curiosity, sometimes with the grim satisfaction of not being the day's cautionary tale. The air itself feels dangerous. Dust motes swirl in the sunlight, ready to lodge in your throat, eyes, or lungs. Ventilation is theoretical, achieved by leaving a window cracked and hoping for a breeze, while the foreman grumbles about heating bills. If the smell of oil doesn't get to you, the ringing in your ears will. The machines are so loud, you shout your conversations, which might explain why everyone over 40 in the factory communicates exclusively in gestures and raised eyebrows. You keep a mental checklist. Don't trip over the loose floorboard. Don't step in the mysterious puddle again. Don't touch the hot pipe. Don't trust the ladder with more splinters than steps. Even the walls are a hazard. Crumbling plaster, exposed nails, and pipes that occasionally leak either water or something else. One brave soul tried to report a leak last week. He's still waiting for maintenance. And rumor has it he's grown fond of the indoor waterfall in the break room. Lunch break offers no real reprieve. If you rest your hand too close to a gear, you'll spend the next hour explaining to the supervisor how you managed to nearly lose a perfectly good finger. The only accepted explanation: I was tired. The only acceptable remedy: don't do it again. When accidents happen, and they always do, response is brisk and unsentimental. If it's a cut, wrap it in a rag and get back to work. If it's worse, someone escorts you to the infirmary. which is just a closet with a bottle of whiskey and a stack of bandages that haven't been cleaned since the centennial. Compensation? You'll be lucky if the boss gives you a day off. Unpaid, of course. If you make it through a shift intact, you savor the small victory, wiggling your fingers, counting your toes, and listening to the bittersweet sound of quitting time. In the Gilded Age, workplace safety is a team sport you never asked to play. The prize? Survival, and maybe a good story to tell over bread and boiled cabbage. Quitting time means shuffling out with your fellow survivors, coughing up more coal dust than a small steam engine. You're paid in cash, counted twice, and then you run home before anyone can steal it or ask you to work overtime. The factory whistle finally shrieks out its evening mercy, echoing off brick walls and down city alleys. For a moment, everyone stands still, waiting for the clangor of machinery to fade into blessed silence. Your shoulders drop, and you realize you've been tensed up for hours, squeezing, lifting, twisting, dodging gears, and the occasional flying nut and bolt. No one talks at first. You're all too busy coughing up the day's dust, spitting black into the gutter, and hoping your lungs can hang on for one more shift tomorrow. You line up at the payroll window with the rest of the crew, boots scuffing the floor, eyes on the prize. The paymaster sits behind a thick glass pane, looking about as cheerful as a man who counts money that isn't his for a living. He pushes your pay across the counter, a handful of coins and a couple of crumpled bills, all slightly damp and smelling faintly of machine oil. You count it twice, just to be sure, once for your own peace of mind, and once because the paymaster accidentally shortchanged you last week. If you're lucky, you slip the money into your sock, inside your boot, or even under your cap. The city's full of quick hands and quicker feet, and nothing says rob me quite like a distracted worker heading home after a 14-hour shift. You nod to your neighbor in line, both of you giving the silent look that says, "Don't talk to me. I'm trying to look poor and uninteresting." The first lesson of clocking out: never flash your pay. The streets outside are a mosaic of exhausted humanity. Hundreds spill from the gates at once, forming rivers of sooty workers weaving around horse carts, barking dogs, and the occasional street vendor who somehow thinks now is a great time to sell roasted chestnuts. You keep your head down, shoulders hunched, and scan for familiar faces. Sometimes you walk in silent groups for protection. Sometimes you slip away alone, hugging alleyways and side streets, just in case anyone from the factory is in a borrowing mood. If you've made it this far without being cornered by your supervisor, you're ahead of the curve. There's always a chance you'll be called back for just a few more hours or an emergency cleaning. Veteran workers know to avoid eye contact and develop a limp at quitting time, just in case management comes sniffing around for volunteers. Overtime pay exists, but it's more myth than policy, like vacation days or a boss who smiles. As you hurry home, you pass fellow workers, their faces smeared with the same black dust, their eyes hollowed by fatigue and too many years of quitting time that never seems to bring enough rest. Children run up to greet their parents, hands outstretched for a coin or a treat. You promise yourself you'll spend a few pennies on fresh bread or maybe an apple, something sweet to remind you that you're still human. You finally reach your tenement, weaving past your neighbors, each one carrying their own day's worth of aches, stories, and small victories. The door slams behind you, and, just for a second, the world feels a little safer. You fish out your pay, count it again, and tuck it somewhere only you know. It's not much, but it's yours. You survived another day. In the Gilded Age, clocking out isn't just a time of day. It's an act of hope, a breath of freedom before it all begins again at dawn. For a few brief hours, you belong to yourself, not the factory, not the foreman, not the city outside your window. And sometimes that's all you need. The streets are a fever dream of trolley bells, horse manure, and suspicious salesmen. Every step is a dance between dodging streetcars and avoiding the latest outbreak of whatever is spreading this week. It's like Frogger, but with fewer survivors. You step outside, squinting against the afternoon glare, and immediately wade into a city symphony. The clang of trolley bells, the whinny of overworked horses, vendors hawking their wares in 6 languages, and someone yelling, "Stop! Thief!" which, statistically, has nothing to do with you this time. The cobblestones underfoot are slick with a mystery blend of mud, garbage, and yesterday's rainfall, or possibly yesterday's soup, depending on how optimistic you're feeling. The sidewalk is barely more than a suggestion. If you keep to the edge, you risk being swept into the gutter by a runaway cart or a parade of children chasing a hoop. Venture too far into the street, and you're prime target for a trolley operator with a schedule and zero patience for human life. Somewhere between these two hazards, you carve out a meandering path, weaving around the laundry lines that droop out windows and threaten to lasso unsuspecting passers-by. You keep one eye out for the local constable, uniform rumpled, mustache impressive, attitude somewhere between bored and actively suspicious. In the Gilded Age, policing often means looking for someone to fine for spitting, jaywalking, or existing while poor. If you're lucky, you'll blend into the crowd. If you're unlucky, well, you'll learn more about municipal fines than you ever wanted to know. As you walk, you pass vendors with dubious credentials selling everything from hot sausages to cure-all tonics in unlabeled bottles. The sausage cart is always parked downwind of the privy. The hot chestnuts have a 50-50 shot at being edible, and the miracle tonic claims to treat everything from baldness to heartbreak. You consider the risk and decide to take your chances with the chestnuts. You hand over a hard-earned coin, burn your fingers on the shell, and pretend not to notice that the vendor's hands haven't seen soap since the last presidential administration. Further down, the crowd thickens. A street preacher, on a crate, rants about the coming apocalypse. Children dart through legs with all the grace of circus acrobats, and a stray dog scavenges through a heap of potato peels like it owns the block. You narrowly avoid stepping in something unpleasant and make a mental note to burn your shoes later. Suddenly, the unmistakable rumble of a trolley car vibrates through the stones. You hop out of the way, heart thumping, as the conductor yells something about, "Watch where you're going," and rings the bell, as if he's calling the faithful to Mass. Behind you, a horse-drawn wagon nearly sideswipes an elderly lady, who responds with language that would impress a dock worker. Disease is always a silent companion. You pass posters warning about the latest summer complaint or autumn fever. If someone sneezes, everyone takes a cautious step back, as if miasma can be outrun with quick reflexes and a stern look. The water pump on the corner has a reputation. One week it's safe, the next it's the cholera fountain. You opt for beer at lunch and hope for the best. Even the air feels alive, full of grit and promise and the ever-present tang of manure. Pigeons squabble for crusts beside labourers on break. A newsboy shouts headlines. Mayor promises cleaner streets, which everyone receives with the kind of skepticism reserved for second-hand shoes. At last, you reach your destination. Clothes dusted with the city's best. Shoes a shade darker. Wallet only slightly lighter. The city is loud, filthy, and utterly unpredictable. But somehow, you've survived another round of Gilded Age street life. No tickets, no trampled toes, no mystery rash, yet. In a world where everything is in motion and nothing is guaranteed, just making it from one block to the next is a triumph worth celebrating. Or at least, worth a hot sausage, assuming your stomach can survive. it. Dinner is an adventure. Maybe you scrape together enough for a bowl of stew at the corner lunchroom. Or maybe you test your immune system with a hot sausage from a vendor whose hygiene is theoretical. Bon appetit. Your stomach rumbles as dusk settles in. A reliable sign that it's time for the nightly ritual of food acquisition, a quest equal parts resourcefulness, risk, and resignation. You pat your pockets. Count your coins, 3, if you round up, and decide tonight's feast will depend on whatever combination of luck and leftovers the sea can offer. The Gilded Age is famous for its opulence. But, on your side of the tracks, dinner is less 7 courses and more one chance. If you're lucky and feeling flush with pennies, you join the line outside the local lunchroom, a tiny establishment with steamed-up windows and a sign that promises hearty meals. 5 cents. The reality is less hearty, more mysterious. The cook, who doubles as the cashier, dishwasher, and head of security, serves up bowls of stew that have a unique relationship with time. The broth simmers all day, taking on new ingredients as patrons and fate dictate. Sometimes it's mostly potato, sometimes it's a meaty surprise, and sometimes, well, you just hope the protein isn't moving. You grab a spot at a sticky table, watching as fellow diners dip stale bread into their bowls with the slow, reverent gestures of people who know every crumb counts. Conversation is hushed and practical. Where's the cheapest loaf? Who's hiring tomorrow? Who saw the landlord coming around with the rent ledger? The stew is hot, filling, and, 2, only occasionally crunchy in a way you can't identify. Still, it warms your bones and quiets your stomach, at least for a while. If the lunchroom is out of reach, you hit the streets in search of something quick, cheap, and ideally, non-lethal. Enter the hot sausage vendor, a staple of the city's culinary underbelly. His cart is always shrouded in steam and optimism. He assures you that everything is fresh today, a statement as flexible as the meat in his links. You watch him turn the sausages with bare hands, and a proud disregard for soap. Still, you hand over a penny, get your sausage in a stiff roll, and brace for whatever culinary surprises await. Street food is a gamble. Sometimes delicious, sometimes adventurous, occasionally both. There's a thrill in eating something that may have last touched a grill, a sidewalk, or a passing pigeon. You douse it in mustard, chew with conviction, and pray you're immune to whatever's growing on the vendor's apron. For those with less luck or less coin, there's always soup kitchen fare. You join a line that snakes down the block, grateful for the charity but wary of the soup. A thin broth that seems to defy physics by never getting thicker, no matter how much barley is promised. You eat standing up, balancing your bowl and bread, listening to 100 conversations in a dozen languages. If you're really down on your luck, dinner might mean scavenging for edible scraps, pooling resources with neighbors, or simply going to bed hungry, distracted by the sounds of distant laughter and the smell of roasted meat wafting from fancier parts of town. It's a stark reminder that in the Gilded Age, dining out is a matter of survival, not style. But somehow, through ingenuity and low expectations, you make do. Maybe your meal is just a potato, a heel of bread, and a cup of weak tea, but it's yours. You share a joke, trade gossip, and finish dinner with a hopeful thought that tomorrow's menu might feature something exotic, like a vegetable that isn't a turnip. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve, thank your luck, or curse it, and head home, stomach not quite full, but spirit intact. In the Gilded Age, every meal is an adventure, and every bite is a victory over hunger, one day at a time. When night falls, the tenement comes alive. Arguments echo through the walls. Someone is playing a fiddle in the stairwell. and you're still trying to figure out if that scratching sound is a rat or your landlord looking for rent. Evening settles over the city, blanketing the block in a patchwork of lamp-lit windows and oily shadows. Inside your building, the real show is just beginning. The last rays of sunlight fade. So do any illusions of quiet. Doors slam, feet stomp overhead, and the wooden floors creak like an ancient ship bracing for a storm. If you thought the workday was chaotic, just wait until your neighbors have finished their stew. You hear the whole tenement conducting its own BV, private symphony. Mrs. Sullivan scolds her sons in a blend of English and Gaelic. Mr. Petrov sings a melancholy Russian lullaby to his baby. And the O'Learys in 4B debate the correct way to boil cabbage, loudly, passionately, and with more drama than most Broadway productions. The walls are so thin you could follow every word, if you spoke 3 languages, and liked to keep up on all the local gossip. Your own family claims a corner of your one-room apartment. Privacy? Not a chance. You change clothes behind a makeshift curtain, a bedsheet strung up for the illusion of decency. Siblings wrestle for blanket space. Someone tries to read by candlelight, and everyone ignores the suspicious damp spot creeping along the baseboard. Somewhere above, a baby wails with impressive stamina, while in the hall, someone's dog howls as if trying out for the city's first canine opera. On the stairs, a teenager practices the fiddle, coaxing out melodies that range from almost beautiful to borderline weaponized. He hits a sour note. Someone curses in Yiddish, and a door slams in protest. The music doesn't stop. It never does. If you're lucky, he'll tire out before midnight. If not, you'll fall asleep to the world's longest folk medley. You lie in bed, staring at the flickering patterns of gaslight leaking in from the alley. The building groans as pipes settle and wind whips through cracks in the brickwork. Someone clatters up the steps, keys jangling. A father coming home late from a double shift, or maybe old Mr. Levy who's been out playing cards since noon. The tenement's heartbeat is always audible. Feet, voices, laughter, anger, love, and the regular reminder that you are never, ever alone. The scratching starts up again. At this hour, it could be anything. A rat looking for a midnight snack, the landlord sneaking around to check who's behind on rent, or a neighbor's toddler determined to tunnel to the next room. You pull the blanket closer, just in case. Tomorrow, you promise yourself you'll set a trap, or, at the very least, ask around to see if anyone else is being visited by Mr. Squeaks. Arguments, too, reach their peak after dark. Someone accuses someone else of stealing bread. A heated debate over who left the door open to the hallway, and thus to the neighborhood cats, rages for a full 10 minutes, complete with finger-pointing and indignant shouting through paper-thin walls. Eventually, truce is called by the shared need for sleep, or by Mrs. Romano threatening to pour cold water on everyone involved. And yet, there are softer moments. A lullaby hums through the floorboards. 2 voices blend in a quiet prayer. And somewhere, miraculously, someone laughs, the sound bright and real against the drone of the city. You close your eyes, lulled by the chaotic, comforting presence of so many lives stacked close together. This is the tenement after dark. Loud, lively, unpredictable, and, strangely, home. You drift off, surrounded by the proof that in the Gilded Age, even the poorest dwellings are full of stories, music, and a kind of togetherness that no amount of rent can buy. If you want to get truly clean, you queue up at the public bathhouse, where the only thing hotter than the water is the gossip. Modesty goes out the steam-filled window. At least you're cleaner than you were, probably. Bathing in the Gilded Age tenements is less a relaxing ritual and more an exercise in humility, patience, and creative towel management. Private bathrooms are the stuff of wealthy legends. For you and your neighbors, cleanliness comes at the cost of waiting in line, clutching a borrowed bar of soap, and praying your spare set of clothes is still where you left it. You start the journey by gathering your bathing kit: a lumpy towel, a cracked comb, and soap that's so thin it's almost translucent, practically a memory of cleanliness. If you're lucky, you might have a second-hand loofah or a chunk of pumice, stone that doubles as a weapon in sibling squabbles. You step out into the hallway, joining a slow-moving parade of equally hopeful souls, each one dressed in their wash-day best, which is to say, the same outfit they wore yesterday, but with more enthusiasm and slightly fewer stains. At the bathhouse, the queue stretches down the block. Some people chat, others sigh, and the bolder ones gossip in rapid-fire bursts. Who's behind on rent? Who's courting whom? Who found a mouse in their boot last week? The air is thick with anticipation, and a faint, lingering cloud of lavender soap mingling with the more honest aroma of humanity. When your turn finally arrives, you pay your nickel at the desk and shuffle into the steamy inner sanctum. The first thing you notice is the heat, thick, damp, and almost overpowering after the drafty chill of the street. Your glasses fog up, your hair curls, and you start sweating before you even find an empty stall. Privacy, that rare luxury, dissolves the moment you step inside. The bathhouse is a cacophony of splashing, singing, shouting, and the constant drip, drip, drip of taps being hastily shut off and turned on again. You pick a cubicle, deposit your bundle on a peg, and try to carve out a little dignity among the crowd. Modesty is a distant memory. You're surrounded by neighbors, classmates, and total strangers, all united by the urgent goal of removing a week's worth of coal dust, kitchen grease, and existential dread. You scrub as quickly as possible, eyes on your own business, ears everywhere else. There's always drama. Someone complains about the water being too cold. Someone else scalds themselves and howls theatrically. A mother tries to wrangle 3 slippery children into the same washtub. One escapes, and a small chase scene unfolds between the showers. In one corner, 2 old women compare scars and stories, competing to see who's lived through the worst winter or the best summer romance. As you lather up, you can't help but overhear the juiciest news. Mr. Jensen lost his job at the brewery. Again, Mrs. Petrov is secretly teaching piano lessons for extra cash. And apparently, the landlord's cousin is courting the butcher's daughter. The gossip swirls thicker than the steam, and you catch yourself grinning as you rinse off, momentarily forgetting your embarrassment. Finally, you reach the finish line. You dry off with your damp towel, hoping it removes more water than it redistributes, and squeeze back into your less dirty clothes. The air outside feels crisp and bracing. You exhale, skin tingling, and realize you actually feel lighter, a little cleaner, a little braver, and much more informed about your neighbors' lives than you were 30 minutes ago. Bath time in the Gilded Age isn't just about washing off grime. It's about finding community, sharing secrets, and learning the true meaning of humility. You walk home smelling faintly of lavender, feeling accomplished, and hoping the clean feeling lasts at least until tomorrow's breakfast shift. Laundry is a community event featuring cold water, harsh soap, and more blisters than clean socks. You wring out each piece and hope it dries before the next rainstorm, or before someone borrows your only decent shirt. The week's dirty laundry is piled up in the corner, a silent accusation and a testament to your ongoing battle with the elements, gravity, and the unholy alliance of coal dust and cheap fabric. You brace yourself, gather your armload of shirts, socks, and underthings, some more thread than textile, and make your way to the backyard, or, in the worst weather, to the tenement's communal basement. You're joined by your neighbors, all equally loaded down and resigned to the ritual. There's a social order to laundry day, determined by seniority, cunning, and whoever managed to claim the least cracked washtub first. You stake your territory, drop your bundle, and queue up for the single spigot of cold water that seems to flow slower every week. If you want hot water, prepare to get creative. Someone has brought a kettle from upstairs. Someone else tries to sweet-talk the landlord's cousin into firing up the building's ancient boiler. Usually, it's cold for everyone. Your hands sting, your teeth chatter, and you wonder why the water always feels colder than your mother-in-law's glare. Soap is another battleground. The communal bar is whittled down to a sliver, and the powder soap on hand could strip paint from a trolley car. You scrub, wring, and beat each garment against the washboard like you're settling an old score. Stains from stew, ink, and mysterious street grime fight back with impressive determination. Your knuckles go raw, your back aches, and you vow, once again, never to wear white, if only because nothing in your wardrobe has actually been white since the Garfield administration. While you work, the air buzzes with gossip, jokes, and the occasional shriek as someone finds a mouse nesting in a pile of rags. Mrs. Romano recounts her son's latest misadventure with laundry. He shrank his own trousers, now they fit the cat. And Mrs. Kowalski grumbles about the weather, the soap, and the scandal of someone's underpants going missing for the third week running. No one admits to borrowing, but everyone eyes the clothesline with suspicion. Rinsing comes next, an exercise in patience and arm strength. You dunk each piece into a second basin, give it a swirl, and hope you've managed to remove more soap than dirt. Then comes the wringing, twisting, squeezing, and wrestling each item until your hands feel permanently clawed. A good wring can make all the difference between clothes that dry by supper and clothes that are still dripping by next Sunday. Hanging out the laundry is an act of faith and calculated risk. The best spots on the line go fast, and you dodge falling drops, stray splashes, and the hopeful gaze of passing birds who seem just a little too interested in your drying socks. You pin everything down, whisper a prayer to the weather gods, and keep one eye on the sky, because the moment you step away is always when the clouds gather for a surprise downpour. If the weather turns, it's a mad dash to grab everything before the rain hits. You and your neighbors race for the lines, each grabbing for shirts, sheets, and that one pair of trousers that still technically fits. Inevitably, something gets dropped in the mud, and you have to decide, wash it again or let it go. Either way, you'll hear about it for weeks. At the end of laundry day, you carry your slightly cleaner, definitely damper bundle home. Your hands are wrinkled, your arms sore, but there's a quiet satisfaction in the weight of your own hard work. You fold your clothes, stack them carefully, and count each item, just in case. In the Gilded Age, laundry day is never easy and rarely finished. But it's proof that even the most basic chores can be a community spectacle, and sometimes a comedy of errors worth surviving. Feeling unwell? Congratulations. Your healthcare options include hoping you get better, drinking mysterious patent medicines, or visiting a doctor whose main qualification is surviving his own treatments. Illness in the Gilded Age tenement isn't so much a possibility as a lifestyle. Every cough echoes through thin walls, every sneeze is a neighborhood event, and you can track the progress of an epidemic by whose window has a sheet tacked up in warning. You wake up congested, your head pounding, And know the next few days will be an adventure in creative remedies and even more creative optimism. Step 1. Denial. Maybe it's just the weather or the lingering effects of last night's stew. Surely you'll feel better after some weak tea and an extra scarf. This strategy lasts until you realize you're sweating through your only shirt and your bones ache in ways that suggest you've been working as a circus acrobat in your sleep. Your mother, a woman of stern resourcefulness, presents you with the family medicine cabinet. A cracked bottle of Dr. Wainwright's invigorating tonic, a tin of menthol rub, and a handful of horehound drops. The tonic claims to cure everything from gout to heartbreak. You take a swig and immediately feel either invigorated or poisoned, sometimes both. The menthol rub burns away your dignity, and the horehound tastes like someone tried to make candy out of tree bark. But at least it's something. Neighbors gather to offer their advice. Mrs. Kowalski swears by onion poultices. Mr. Romano recommends a mixture of whiskey and hot pepper. Mrs. Petrov, never one to do things halfway, produces a jar of something pickled and unidentifiable, which she insists you must eat before sunrise. You smile, nod, and quietly hope the illness runs its course before you have to try anything with tentacles. If things get worse, you're faced with a choice. Trek to the corner apothecary and spend half your week's pay on a bottle of soothing elixir, or seek out a doctor. The apothecary's shelves are lined with colorful vials and patent medicines that promise miraculous results, most of which contain more alcohol than the local saloon. You select a bottle with the boldest label, drink it in hope, and promptly fall asleep. Was it healing or just a nap? The world may never know. Seeing a doctor is an act of desperation. The local physician, known for both his impressive mustache and his ability to prescribe brandy for everything, runs a practice that smells of camphor and panic. He listens to your chest, asks a few questions, and recommends bleeding, a mustard plaster, or, if you're lucky, a day of bed rest, unpaid, of course. If surgery is mentioned, you take it as a threat. Anesthesia is for the rich. Everyone else gets a shot of whiskey and someone to hold down their legs. For more serious ailments, there's the hospital, a word that means building filled with coughing people, mysterious stains, and the faint scent of despair. You avoid it if you can. Survival rates are low, and rumor has it, if you check in, you might check out less some of your original parts. So you stay home, wrapped in every available blanket, hoping your immune system is feeling ambitious. The best medicine is usually rest, but even that is a luxury. With rent due, work can't wait, and neither can the factory foreman, who's seen it all and recommends toughening up as a cure-all. You drag yourself out the door, feverish and wobbly, and blend in with a crowd of fellow sufferers, red-eyed, sniffly, united in mutual misery. By some miracle, most of the time, you do get better. A few days later, you're back at the communal sink, bragging that you survived, and exchanging recipes for the world's best cough syrup. In the Gilded Age, survival isn't guaranteed, but complaining about the local doctor is practically a tradition. You wear your latest illness as a badge of honor, proof that you, and possibly your liver, are tougher than you look. Rent day means hiding from the landlord, who stalks the hallways like a debt-collecting spectre. If you can't pay, you might find your belongings on the street next to everyone else's. The tension begins building days in advance. You hear the whispers before you see the man himself, rumors floating up and down the stairs like laundry lint. He's coming on Thursday this month. No, Friday, after sundown. Some people claim to have a calendar devoted solely to the landlord's movements, but no one's ever actually seen it. The only certainty is this: When the landlord cometh, you'd better have your rent, your excuses, or your running shoes ready. On the morning in question, the whole building is on high alert. Doors close a little faster, curtains twitch, and even the most quarrelsome neighbors suddenly find something in common: the desire not to be home when the rent man knocks. Children are deployed as early warning systems, stationed at windows and stairwells. Their job: spot the telltale bowler hat and shout, "He's here," with the urgency of a town crier announcing the plague. Your family's strategy is classic: fade into the background. Your mother sweeps furiously, as if a clean hallway might distract him. Your father sits by the window, practicing his just stepped out face. You gather your few valuables, some clothes, a cherished photograph, that one plate not yet chipped beyond repair, and stack them discreetly by the door, just in case a quick exit is necessary. Then comes the knock. Not a polite tap, but a rap with the confidence of someone who's evicted half the neighborhood and expects to finish the job before lunch. You freeze, heart racing, and will yourself to become invisible. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If your luck holds, he'll move along to the next door, where Mr. Kowalski is giving an award-worthy performance about a lost paycheck and promising next week will be different. You listen through the wall, learning new ways to plead for time. Tales of sick mothers, delayed wages, sudden misfortune, stories as familiar as the creak of the floorboards. But if you're less fortunate, the landlord is at your threshold, monocle gleaming, ledgers in hand, and a look that says he's heard every story and believes none. You hand over your meager collection of bills and coins, counted twice. Fingers crossed he doesn't notice the shortfall. Sometimes he takes pity. More often, he sighs, makes a note, and warns, "Next time, it'll be the street." No one doubts he means it. The block is full of cautionary tales. Families whose trunks now double as furniture on the sidewalk, cherished keepsakes scattered in the gutter, dreams packed up in old suitcases. Eviction isn't the only threat. The landlord has other tools: fines for mysterious damages, fees for necessary repairs, sudden rent hikes justified by nothing but his own ambition. You learn to expect the unexpected. Some tenants offer small gifts: fresh bread, a mended shirt, a hopeful smile, in the hope of goodwill. Others band together, forming loose alliances of mutual aid. If someone can't pay, a quiet collection is taken. It isn't much, but in the Gilded Age, even a few coins can keep a roof overhead. When the ordeal is finally over, you breathe easier, for now. The building buzzes with post-rent gossip: who got a reprieve, who got a warning, who might be packing their bags. Relief mingles with guilt, and the quiet knowledge that next month the dance will begin anew. In the Gilded Age, the landlord cometh like winter, cold, relentless, and utterly indifferent to hope or hardship. Your best defenses are solidarity, a sharp ear for footsteps in the hall, and, when all else fails, a good hiding place behind the kitchen door. Despite it all, you fantasize about winning the social lottery. Maybe you'll invent something, marry, up, or discover a gold coin in the gutter. In the Gilded Age, dreams are free. Just don't let anyone charge you for them. Every sooty sunrise, between the shriek of the factory whistle and the shuffle to work, your mind drifts to a brighter future. You imagine stumbling on a money bag dropped by a Wall Street tycoon, or charming a visiting heiress in a case of mistaken identity. Maybe you'll invent the next big thing: self-cooling underwear, perhaps. Or a hat that doubles as an umbrella and a soup bowl. Someone, after all, is getting rich off doorknobs and fountain pens. Why not you? You study the city's rich folk from afar. Top hats gliding past in fine carriages. Ladies in silk gloves with dogs, better fed than most people you know. Stories circulate, growing more improbable with every telling. There's the newsboy who bought a lottery ticket and now lives in a house with 2 staircases. The Irish widow who married the landlord's son and promptly disappeared to upstate. The tinker who claims he found a diamond ring in a puddle and pawned it for enough to start his own business, selling umbrellas, naturally. Some evenings, you join your neighbours on the stoop for a round of collective daydreaming. If I struck it rich, you declare, I'd buy a whole loaf of white bread and eat it in one sitting. Butter, too. Mrs. Kowalski says she'd travel to Paris. Never mind she gets seasick crossing the street. Old Mr. Romano promises he'd buy out the landlord and give everyone free rent for a year, though you suspect he'd just buy a better fiddle and play louder. Children wish for sweets, new shoes, or a day off from the factory. Each wish is as grand as it is unlikely, but no one wants to spoil the game. The city is full of get-rich-quick schemes, each one more dubious than the last. Invest in electric lights. Sign up for this new insurance. Try your luck at the racetrack. There are advertisements for patent medicines that claim to cure baldness, make you irresistible, or guarantee success for just 5 easy payments. You know someone who sunk their savings into a fake oil well, and another who invested in a perpetual motion machine. Both are back on the assembly line. Older, but not richer. Still, hope springs eternal. Every time you spot a loose cobblestone, you pry it up, just in case there's a stash of gold coins underneath. When the newspapers print stories about fortunes made overnight, you read them twice. Then check your pockets for the lottery ticket you keep, battered but hopeful, for the just-in-case scenario. Marriage, too, is a possible shortcut to riches, though the eligible rich are rarer than warm socks in January. You dress up for Sunday strolls, practice your manners, and try to look like someone who might own more than one pair of shoes. Mostly, you end up talking to other dreamers, spinning tales bigger than your pay packet. But when the dreaming's done and you're back to counting pennies, you realize something. Dreams might not buy bread, but they make the long days shorter and the cold nights warmer. In the Gilded Age, hope is the real currency, traded, shared, sometimes spent foolishly, but never entirely lost. So you tuck yourself into bed, pockets empty but imagination full, and promise yourself that tomorrow you'll check the gutter again. After all, fortunes have to start somewhere, and if not, well, there's always next week's lottery. Just remember, never pay anyone to dream for you. Sharing one room with 5 siblings and a grandparent means you're never alone, except in your own head. Privacy is a myth, and peace and quiet are things you only hear about in church sermons. The sun rises on a tangle of blankets, limbs, and morning breath. Your household is a living, breathing miracle of coexistence and trampled boundaries. You're wedged between your little brother, who flails in his sleep, and your eldest sister, who has perfected the art of hogging all the covers. Somewhere at the foot of the bed, your grandmother mutters in her sleep, fighting an invisible battle with the landlord or possibly last night's dinner. You wake up each day already in the thick of it. There's always someone in your face, underfoot, or loudly discussing the relative merits of boiled potatoes versus mashed. The kitchen table doubles as a workspace, laundry zone, debate hall, and sometimes a doctor's office when someone inevitably sprains an ankle tripping over the family cat. There's no such thing as alone time, unless you count the 43 seconds you spend washing up at the communal sink before someone pounds on the door demanding their turn. Every morning is a ballet of logistics. Who gets the first use of the chamber pot? Who finds a matching pair of socks? Who manages to snag the least stale crust of bread before the rest descend like hungry pigeons? Your mother is a maestro of multitasking, orchestrating breakfast, school books, and squabbles with nothing but a wooden spoon and an iron will. Your father slips out early, leaving behind a trail of warnings. No fighting, no running, and for heaven's sake, don't let your uncle near the stove again. Evenings are a lesson in creative crowd management. After a day in the factory, school, or running errands, everyone piles back into the tiny room. Stories are swapped, jokes retold, arguments reignited over who stole, whose sock, or why. The baby gets away with everything. You play games with pebbles and string, inventing your own fun because toys are a luxury. And the real entertainment is watching your older siblings try to keep a straight face while plotting pranks. Grandma always has the last word, whether it's a bedtime tale from the old country, dire warnings about catching a chill, or unsolicited advice about marriage. Marry for money, or at least for someone who can cook a decent stew. Her voice blends with the lullaby of city noises filtering through the walls. Neighboring, families arguing. Fiddles playing. Babies wailing. The distant rumble of a trolley car. At night, finding sleeping space is a feat of human origami. You roll and tuck yourself in, elbow to elbow, hoping not to land on the hard spot where the bed frame sags. Someone inevitably snores. Someone else talks in their sleep. And if it's thunderstorm season, you all try to crowd under the one dry blanket, laughing as the rain taps out a rhythm on the roof. Arguments flare quickly and burn out even faster. No one has the luxury of holding a grudge for long. Not when you'll need a partner to fetch water, share a crust of bread, or back you up when the landlord comes knocking. Forgiveness is a survival strategy, and affection is woven into every shout, shove, and badly mended sock. And when, by some miracle, the room falls silent, you lie awake for a moment, enjoying the rare stillness. In the Gilded Age, family life is noisy, crowded, and sometimes utterly maddening. But it's also your fortress, your community, and the best place in the world to learn the true meaning of togetherness and chaos. You drift off sleep, comforted by the familiar soundscape of kin, certain that tomorrow will bring more noise, more mess, and, somehow, more love. Want entertainment? Head to the local saloon, where for the price of a nickel, you can hear a piano, drink watered-down beer, and dodge a bar fight or two. Or, just sit on your stoop and judge the neighbors. Both are classics. The sun dips behind the skyline, painting brick walls and laundry lines gold. The workday's dust and tension settle, and the tenement begins to stir with a different sort of energy, a restless, eager anticipation that even poverty can't entirely snuff out. You might not have cash for the theatre or a fancy dinner, but you're not about to let the night pass in silence. Your first option, and always the most colourful, is the neighbourhood saloon. The door swings open to a rush of noise. Laughter, shouts, a ragtime piano clanking out a tune with more enthusiasm than skill. The bartender greets you with a nod, and you hand over your hard-earned nickel for a glass of beer so thin you can almost see the bottom before you take a sip. Still, it's cold and mildly intoxicating, and if you close your eyes and ignore the floating specks, it almost tastes like freedom. The clientele is a who's who of working-class ambition and misfortune, factory hands nursing sore backs, dock workers fresh off their shift, women in bright dresses hoping for a dance or a story, and the regulars who seem to have claimed a stool as their birthright. Old Mr. Flanagan tells the same joke every night, and it somehow gets funnier after the second beer. The piano player, fingers stained with ink and tobacco, pounds away until someone inevitably requests Sweet Rosie O'Grady for the 20th time. You join in the chorus, off-key but exuberant. Of course, no Gilded Age saloon is complete without the occasional spectacle. Maybe it's a heated debate over politics, or a full-blown brawl that starts with a spilled drink and ends with two men rolling in the sawdust, cheered on by everyone else. The bartender is used to this. He just lifts the bottles off the counter and waits for the excitement to burn itself out. You dodge a flying hat, grab your beer, and decide that, for entertainment value, nothing on Broadway can compete. If you're low on funds, or just low on patience for other people's elbows, there's always the stoop. You join your neighbors on the building's steps, the city's unofficial auditorium. From here, you get a front-row seat to life in all its glory. Couples strolling arm in arm, street vendors hawking roasted peanuts, children darting between lamplight and shadow. Gossip flows freely. Who got a raise? Whose laundry went missing? Why Mrs. Kowalski is still feuding with Mrs. Romano over a borrowed kettle. You add your 2 cents and listen, content to be a critic in the peanut gallery. Sometimes an impromptu concert breaks out, harmonica, tin whistle, or just a group singing folk songs from the old country. You clap along, share a joke, or challenge your neighbor to a game of cards played on the stoop with a deck missing the Queen of Hearts and 3 jacks. The air is thick with stories, laughter, and the occasional shout from a window above. Keep it down or I'll toss a bucket. They never do, but you all duck anyway. The night air is cool, and for once, you don't mind. You soak in the sights and sounds. The flicker of gas lamps, the jangling of harnesses as a horse-drawn carriage rattles by, the distant echo of music from another block. Entertainment in the Gilded Age doesn't require much. Just company, imagination, and a willingness to enjoy the moment, however humble it may be. As bedtime approaches, you say your goodnights and retreat indoors, pockets still nearly empty but spirit a little lighter. In the Gilded Age, nightlife isn't about luxury. It's about community, resilience, and making memories where you can. Whether you spent the evening dodging bar fights or winning a game of stoop-side rummy, you go to bed knowing you squeezed every last drop of joy from another long, hard day. Maybe you're new to America, and the streets of gold turned out to be more street than gold. Navigating languages, customs, and suspicion, you try to carve out your piece of the city, one underpaid shift at a time. It started with hope, a whisper from a cousin, a poster in a shop window, the persistent rumor that in America, anyone could become rich with a little grit and a willingness to work. You boarded the ship with a trunk full of dreams and 3 generations' worth of family recipes. You arrived with less money, more luggage, and a sense that anything was possible, at least once the seasickness wore off. But now, here you are, elbow to elbow, in a tenement filled with voices from every corner of Europe and beyond. The hallways are a chorus of unfamiliar languages: Polish, Italian, Yiddish, German, Irish, and a dozen others. None of them matching the carefully practiced English you learned back home. You discover, to your dismay, that "how do you do" is not actually a question. And take a rain check does not mean standing outside during a storm. Everyday life is an exercise in translation and adaptation. You watch your neighbors for cues, how to haggle with the grocer, how to ask for more coal, which shopkeeper might let you slide on credit, and which policeman you should definitely avoid. Sometimes you barter food or labor for favors, passing on what you can: homemade bread for a hand with the laundry, help with the rent in exchange for English lessons or a place to stash an extra cousin. Work is hard to come by, and when you get it, it's grueling and poorly paid. You're the first hired and the first fired. The foreman calls you Greenhorn or Fritz or Giuseppe, depending on what part of your accent gives you away. Your hands blister and your back aches, but you push through, sending pennies home, or saving what you can in a cracked jar on the mantel. You learn quickly that here, nothing is guaranteed, except that the rent will always be due on time. There's suspicion everywhere, sometimes subtle, sometimes blunt as a shovel. Landlords charge more if you don't speak the language. Shopkeepers shortchange you if you hesitate. At work, the Irish stick together. The Germans have their club, the Italians their society hall. You find comfort in your own community's gatherings. A church service in your language. A festival with familiar food. A song you haven't heard since you left home. You cling to those moments, even as you slowly collect new customs. Halloween pumpkins, 4th of July parades, peanut butter sandwiches, which you suspect are a prank Americans play on newcomers. Children pick up the language faster. Their words a mix of their parents' nostalgia and their new country's slang. You watch them run off to school, shoes a little too big, hearts a little too brave. They'll correct your pronunciation at dinner, make fun of your accent, and insist on celebrating Thanksgiving, even if you have to ask the neighbors how to cook a turkey. There's pride. 2. The flag out front, the first pay envelope, the citizenship papers tucked away with the good dishes. You may never be fully at home, not the way your children will be. But you find your place in the endless dance of arrivals and departures. You learn to recognize opportunity in the glint of a coin, the warmth of a neighbor's smile, the comfort of hearing your own name in a crowded city. At the end of another long day, you look out the window at the flickering city lights. The melting pot is more of a stew, sometimes comforting, sometimes too spicy, always simmering with new faces and old dreams. You tuck yourself in, whisper goodnight in the language of your childhood, and hope that tomorrow the streets of gold will be just a little less paved with manure. But for now, you belong to the city, and it belongs to you, strange, noisy, and full of possibility. The hottest trend this year is whatever still fits. If you can patch it, wear it. If you can't, trade it. And if you're feeling fancy, turn your old trousers into tomorrow's jacket. You open your battered trunk in the corner of the room, more out of habit than hope. Inside is your entire wardrobe. 2 shirts, one with a collar, both with character, a pair of trousers with patches on the knees and seat, socks with more holes than yarn, and a jacket that has seen more winters than you care to count. You take inventory as you dress. 1, 2, 3 layers, and then pause, wondering which garment will survive another trip through the factory or another winter's walk to work. Nothing matches, but nobody expects it to. Fashion here is measured in the number of seams and repairs a piece can endure, not in style or season. You learn to appreciate the skill of a well-placed patch, the ingenuity of a borrowed button, and the almost mystical art of darning. Your mother, grandmother, and every neighbor within shouting distance is an expert at making the old new again, or, at least, less obviously falling apart. The swap economy flourishes in the tenements. When your sleeves creep up your arms and your socks become more ankle warmer than foot covering, you trade with the neighbor's kid who hit a growth spurt. If you're lucky, you score a shirt with only 2 stains instead of 4, and you promise to pass it along when you outgrow it, or when you finally accept that it will never truly fit in the shoulders. On Sundays, you pull out your best, which is just the cleanest, least tattered option. You brush off the dust, tuck in every stray thread, and try to look presentable, knowing everyone else is doing the same. Some families keep a company jacket, worn by whoever needs to impress a teacher, a boss, or a potential spouse. There are whispered stories of a mythical pair of trousers that have attended 5 weddings, 3 funerals, and at least 1 mayoral handshake, all while hiding a patch that runs nearly from knee to hip. Creativity thrives out of necessity. You watch your mother transform last year's outgrown dress into a passable shirt for your sister, or see your neighbor turn an old curtain to a new skirt. Fashion inspired by whatever happens to be available, and only slightly less itchy than sandpaper. paper. If you lose a button, you replace it with anything that fits through a buttonhole. A spare coin, a wooden bead, or that mysterious metal disc found on the street. Origin, unknown. Shoes are a constant negotiation between function and fantasy. A new pair is out of reach, so you stuff newspaper into the toes, tie the laces with string, and hope the holes line up with the parts of your feet least likely to get wet. In winter, you wrap your socks in extra rags and trudge through the slush with the resigned dignity of a penguin. Fashion magazines, if you ever see them, read like science fiction. Parisian silks, they boast, feathers and fur. Meanwhile, your personal style is wool with a hint of lard soap. Still, you do your best to keep up with trends. One day you roll your sleeves. The next you wear your cap at a jaunty angle, hoping the neighbors notice your flair. Spoiler, they notice, and they have opinions. At the end of the day, your clothes go back into the trunk, ready for tomorrow's challenges. Each tear is a story, each patch a testament to endurance and thrift. You take a certain pride in your resilience. In the Gilded Age, true style isn't what you wear. It's how you survive in it and how you make it last. You tuck yourself in, already planning tomorrow's outfit, meaning whichever shirt is driest. You may not have a closet full of finery, but you have what matters. A wardrobe patched with love, stitched with memory, and just fashionable enough to get you through one more day. Whether it's for jaywalking, loitering, or just looking suspicious, chances are good you'll get a talking to from a police officer who's more interested in bribes than justice. Just nod, smile, and move along. Life in the Gilded Age city means learning the delicate dance of avoiding trouble while somehow always being in the middle of it. You leave your tenement, step onto the bustling street, and instantly find yourself walking a fine line, quite literally. If you're trying to avoid a puddle and wind up straying off the curb at the wrong time, it's a city where the rules are everywhere, but they shift like the wind. Cross in the middle of the block? That's jaywalking. Stand too long on a corner talking with your friends? Loitering. Have a face that suggests you might be thinking too hard? Suspicious. The local beat cop is both a fixture and a force of nature, patrolling his stretch with a whistle, a billy club, and a mustache so authoritative it could fine you on its own. He knows every kid, every barkeep, and every alley shortcut. His sense of justice is equal parts official policy and personal whim. Today, he stops you for a chat. Maybe you look like someone who forgot to tip their cap to a city official. Or maybe you just happen to be the nearest bystander when a crate of apples mysteriously disappeared from a vendor's cart. You smile, keep your hands visible, and respond with all the respect you can muster. "Good evening, officer." He nods, leans in, and asks what you're doing, though the answer hardly matters. The subtext is clear. You're poor, you're out late, and that's already 2 strikes. He makes vague references to keeping the peace and watching your step. If you're extra unlucky, he'll threaten to take you in just to teach you a lesson. In reality, what he wants is obvious: a little encouragement to let you go on your way. A coin slipped discreetly, a favor promised, a loaf of bread left behind at the station. It's the city's worst-kept secret. Justice runs smoother when greased with a bit of cash or kindness. You've seen others pay their way out of minor trouble, sometimes for offenses as serious as spitting on the sidewalk or as trivial as whistling after midnight. There are rules, and then there are exceptions, mostly for those who can afford them. If you have nothing to offer, you nod vigorously, promise to move along, and do just that. There's always another corner, another stoop, another street, where the law might not be looking. You warn your friends to watch out, and everyone becomes an amateur legal scholar, swapping stories about which officers are tough, which are soft, and which have a fondness for Mrs. Kowalski's apple pie. Sometimes the law is less about crime and more about keeping order, or the appearance of order. Protests, strikes, or even gatherings at the park are watched with eagle eyes. You hear tales of pickpockets vanishing from custody with suspicious speed, and of factory owners shaking hands with the chief of police while their workers are marched off for disturbing the peace. For immigrants, the rules are even blurrier. An unfamiliar accent or the wrong set of papers can mean extra questions, extra scrutiny, or a ticket for a crime you didn't know existed. You learn to carry your documents, walk with confidence, and never ever run. Unless you want to explain why you're in a hurry to someone with the power to ruin your week. At the end of the day, you make it home, a little wiser and a little more wary. Your friends gather and swap stories, each outdoing the last. He fined me for leaning on a lamppost. I got a warning for smiling at the wrong person. It's all part of city life. A game with shifting rules, unpredictable referees, and the simple strategy: nod, smile, move along, and keep your pockets shallow. In the Gilded Age, the law is everywhere. But justice is up for negotiation. And sometimes, a well-timed grin is your best defense. Sundays mean church, mostly for the free bread after service. It's your one chance at rest, reflection, and maybe a quiet nap, while the preacher rails against the sins of poverty and the price of bread. Sunday mornings in the tenement are a slightly different breed of chaos. The alarm isn't the factory whistle, but the collective thud of dozens of neighbors rushing through their Sunday best. The same clothes as every other day, just with a little extra brushing and one fewer visible patch. Your mother corrals the family like a general mustering troops, pressing you into a clean-ish shirt and spit-shine shoes. Your little brother protests, your grandmother launches into a hymn before breakfast, and your father, miraculously, lets himself sleep in an extra half hour. The street is alive with a parade of neighbors, all heading in the same direction. Church, synagogue, or, for a few optimistic souls, the park. You join the slow-moving crowd, careful not to lose anyone in the press of hats and handkerchiefs. Every block brings a new gathering: Italian Catholics waving at Irish Protestants, Jewish families dodging the odd horse cart, and everyone else forming alliances based on the shortest sermon and the best after-service snack. Inside the church, you slip into a pew, grateful for the wooden bench and the brief illusion of order. The building is a patchwork of generations: babies wailing, elders snoring, children swinging their legs and poking each other when parents aren't looking. Sunlight spills through colored windows, painting everyone in shades of blue and gold. For a moment, you forget the week's worries. The musty air is heavy with incense, perfume, and the subtle undertone of shoe polish and boiled potatoes. The service begins with hymns sung loud and proud, some in tune, most in hope. You belt out the familiar verses, voices rising together as if pure volume could guarantee divine intervention. The preacher takes the pulpit and launches into a sermon, equal parts fire, brimstone, and economic commentary. You nod along to the part about humility, raise an eyebrow at the bit about charity, and quietly marvel at how many times he manages to mention bread prices without anyone throwing a stale roll. Sometimes your mind wanders. You think about the factory, the family, the ever-present dance of bills and paydays. You count the cracks in the ceiling, plot out tomorrow's errands, and, when the preacher hits his third crescendo, you let your eyelids drift shut. If you're lucky, You get a brief nap before your mother's elbow finds your ribs. The highlight of the morning, though, is always the end. After the final amen, you join the throng at the back doors, jostling for a spot at the table of free bread and coffee. You grab a hunk, still warm if you're quick, hard as brick if you're not, and share a smile with your neighbors. This is where community is truly built, in whispered gossip, exchanged recipes, and promises of help come moving day. For some, Sunday is a spiritual recharge. For others, it's a social event, a rare chance to see old friends and let children run wild in a yard not littered with broken glass. Your grandmother catches up on news from the old country. Your father chats with the grocer about the possibility of cheaper flour. And you swap secrets with the other kids about who's getting married, who's in trouble, and which family might be moving away next month. By afternoon, the city quiets. The only things open are the corner shops and the world's bravest newsboy. You head home, stomach a little fuller, spirit a little lighter. Maybe you play cards, maybe you take a nap, maybe you just sit and watch the sun crawl across the tenement wall. For a few precious hours, the noise of life is replaced by something gentler, hope, peace, and the comfort of knowing you're not alone in the struggle. In the Gilded Age, Sundays aren't about fancy hats or perfect faith. They're about survival, solidarity, and carving out a little sanctuary in a world that rarely pauses. And sometimes, that's more than enough. As you curl up under a threadbare blanket, surrounded by the muffled noises of the tenement, you wonder if tomorrow will be better, or if the bedbugs will unionize before you do. Either way, good night. The day finally ends. Though you sometimes wonder if it's just the night shift of chaos. Darkness simply means swapping factory whistles for the lullaby of city noises and thin, restless walls. The tenement is quieter now, but never truly silent. Footsteps echo in the hallway, a distant baby wails, and somewhere upstairs, someone is still arguing about borrowed bread or the fate of a missing chicken. Your sleeping arrangements are charitably cozy. The bed is crowded. 2 siblings, an uncle who snores like a malfunctioning bellows, and a blanket so full of holes you suspect it was designed to maximize airflow. You take your spot along the edge, careful not to jostle anyone. The mattress, such as it is, has lost its shape and its morals, a lumpy mess with hidden springs that conspire against your spine. Outside, the street lamp flickers, casting long, uncertain shadows across the peeling wallpaper. Your body aches in that bone-deep way only 12 hours of labor or a double ration of street sweeping can bring. You stretch out, seeking that mythical position where your back, legs, and conscience all find a little comfort. But every time you get close, someone shifts, coughs, or mutters in their sleep, and the whole operation starts over. There's no white noise machine, no lavender pillow spray, no memory foam mattress, just the stubborn hum of the city, the clip-clop of a late horse cart, a stray dog barking in the alley, the high-pitched whine of a mosquito searching for its next victim. Some nights, a late-night fiddler serenades the whole block, his tune drifting in through cracked panes, mixing with the chorus of creaking floors and tired laughter from the rooms below. You do your best to ignore the small army of bedbugs plotting world domination beneath the sheets. You've made uneasy peace with them, so long as they stick to their side of the bed and don't start sending demands for better working conditions. At least the cold keeps the fleas sluggish and the mice less ambitious. Sleep comes in fits and starts. You drift off, half dreaming about a softer pillow or a bed all to yourself. Sometimes you remember the stories your grandmother told of her childhood, about haylofts and quiet countryside nights Sometimes you count the cracks in the ceiling. Sometimes you just give up and listen to your father snore in Morse code. Dreams flicker in and out, sometimes bright and hopeful, sometimes anxious and strange. Visions of finding a lost coin, getting a day off, or just waking up to a breakfast with something other than oatmeal. Despair slips in around the edges, the doubt that tomorrow will be any different, that next month's rent will be paid, that the cough in your chest will finally fade. But so does hope. You remember the neighbor who found steady work, the friend who finally learned English, the family down the hall who managed to buy a second blanket this year. It isn't much, but it's enough to make you smile, just a little, in the darkness. As the building settles and quiets, you feel the weight of the day lifting, replaced by the lighter burdens of dreams. You might not know what tomorrow brings. Another shift, another argument, another small victory. But for now, you surrender to exhaustion, trusting that sunrise always comes. So you close your eyes, wish the bedbugs a merciful night off, and float on the sounds of your city and your family. In the Gilded Age, even sleep is a blend of dreams and despair, never perfect, always necessary, and, somehow, enough to get you through until morning. Good night. Some nights, the only thing more likely than getting sleep is getting evacuated. Gilded Age tenements are fire traps made of kindling, wishful thinking, and bad electrical wiring, if you're lucky enough to have electricity. Floods are just as frequent, thanks to leaking roofs and the mysterious phenomenon of indoor rain. The real thrill? Figuring out whether tonight's wake-up call will be a burning stairwell, a burst water pipe, or that neighbor who practices his tuba at midnight. In a building this old, you learn to sleep with one ear open. It's less about paranoia and more about pattern recognition. A late-night shriek in the hallway? That's Mrs. Romano and her famous night terrors. A steady drip, drip, drip in the corner? Either someone left the tap running again, or your ceiling's about to develop a new skylight. It's a nightly lottery. Never dull, always damp, occasionally life-threatening. The greatest threat is fire. There's always a story. Last winter, the Cohen family's kitchen candle tipped over, sending flames racing up the curtains and half the block into the street in their nightclothes. You keep a bucket by the door, more for peace of mind than effectiveness, and practice fire drills that mostly involve running in circles while your mother shouts, "Save the bread." Candles are rationed and handled like rare jewels. Anytime someone mentions installing gas lamps, your grandmother starts muttering about the year of the Great Explosion. Sometimes, just for variety, the plumbing decides to revolt. Pipes in the walls shudder, moan, and occasionally burst, flooding rooms with cold, rusty water. You wake to the sound of splashing, leap from bed, and discover your best socks floating toward the door like tiny lifeboats. The tenement's basement transforms into a swimming pool, chlorine not included, while upstairs, the neighbors form a bucket brigade that quickly devolves into chaos. The landlord shrugs and promises repairs next week, which in Gilded Age time means never, but I'll raise the rent anyway. Leaks aren't limited to the pipes. Roofs are a suggestion, especially after the third rainstorm of the week. Buckets and pots line the windowsills, ready to catch the slow, persistent drips that sound like a clock counting down to your next bad mood. Occasionally, the leak becomes a full-on waterfall, drenching beds, books, and, if you're lucky, only your least favorite uncle's trousers. Then there are the other emergencies, like the time a tuba-playing neighbor mistook midnight for the perfect hour to practice his arpeggios. Or the night old Mr. Levy tried to light the stove with a faulty match and nearly took out half the block's eyebrows. Sometimes it's nothing more than a wave of gossip about the landlord planning inspections, which sends everyone into a cleaning frenzy that's louder than most parades. Disaster breeds community, or at least a kind of weary camaraderie. When the alarm sounds, be it for fire, flood, or catastrophic tuba, everyone pours into the street, blankets wrapped tight, comparing complaints and offering spare towels. Children treat it as an adventure, running barefoot in puddles, while parents trade stories about disasters past. Mrs. Kowalski always brings out her secret stash of cookies, claiming sugar calms the nerves, and someone inevitably tries to get a card game going before the all-clear is given. Eventually, the crisis passes, flames doused, water mopped, instruments silenced, and everyone shuffles back indoors, a little wetter, sootier, and more exhausted than before. You rearrange your soaked bedding, pat the walls in thanks, and climb back into bed, grateful that the building survived one more night of history's creative chaos. In the Gilded Age tenement, every night is an unpredictable adventure. Fires, floods, and fiascos are part of the rent, and somehow, you learn to sleep anyway, just not with both eyes closed. When your pockets are emptier than the local library's humor section, it's time to line up for free soup, a culinary adventure in which broth is more of a concept than a flavor. The line stretches around the block, everyone trading rumors about who's serving today. You get your bowl, you get a slice of bread that could double as a doorstop, and you get a brief reminder that hunger is the great equalizer. Bon appetit, and don't ask what's in the soup. The experience starts before sunrise, when the city is still shivering under a grey dawn and your stomach is already staging protests. You shuffle out with your neighbors, pockets empty but spirits stubborn, drawn to the church basement or charitable hall where the daily soup line forms. It's a social event as much as a necessity. You see the same faces every day, all united by a collective craving for hot liquid and human dignity. The line is long, and the gossip flows faster than the soup. You hear rumors about a fresh batch of potatoes, a new volunteer with a soft spot for children, or, on the wildest days, a rumor that today's soup has meat. It never does, but the hope is always there, floating like an invisible carrot. You swap stories with the person in front of you, who found a penny on the street, who got turned away at the bread shop, who heard that the mayor's wife once disguised herself and came through this very line. The people behind you debate whether yesterday's beef was actually beet. Consensus. Undetermined. At last, you make it inside, blinking in the steamy warmth. The room is filled with the aroma of something. Potatoes, certainly. Maybe cabbage. Possibly regret. Volunteers scurry about, ladling soup into battered bowls and offering slices of bread with the density and flexibility of a roof shingle. There's a hush of gratitude mixed with quiet calculation. Which line moves fastest? Which volunteer gives the biggest scoop? And is that really parsley? Or just a piece of someone's mitten? The soup itself is a marvel of resourceful cooking. Thin, but warm. Salty, but oddly comforting. Each spoonful is a game of culinary roulette. Some bites have a sliver of carrot, others a potato cube, and every so often you hit a jackpot of actual protein, beans, a mystery chunk, something that might once have been chicken if you squint. You don't ask questions. The bread is sturdy enough to patch a roof, but it sops up the broth and makes the meal last a little longer. You eat in the company of all walks of life. The elderly gentleman who quotes poetry with every mouthful. the mother dividing her portion between 3 children, the factory worker who sits in the corner, eyes closed, savoring every spoonful as if he's back in his mother's kitchen. Conversation is quiet, everyone is tired, and there's a certain humility to accepting charity that no one wants to dwell on. But there are moments of humor too, as people trade advice about which city block is best for penny finding or which soup kitchen is rumored to serve real tea on Sundays. When you finish, you thank the volunteers, sometimes with words, sometimes with a shy smile or a nod. You leave with a belly a little fuller and a heart just a touch lighter. If you're lucky, someone offers you an extra slice of bread for the walk home. Or you find a neighbor willing to split a day-old apple they managed to save from the grocer's bin. The walk home is quieter. The city feels just a little warmer. The world a little less indifferent. You survived another meal, learned another rumor, and added another story to your ever-growing soup line lore. In the Gilded Age, charity lines aren't just about food. They're about community, resilience, and the strange dignity that comes from sharing your hunger and your hope with everyone else standing in the same line. If you're young, school is a break from child labor, a place to gather with dozens of other kids in a single, drafty classroom. Lessons are taught by someone who may or may not know how to read. And recess means running outside to get fresh air and new lice. You copy your letters onto a slate, dodge the teacher's ruler, and dream of a future where spelling your name right might be your ticket out. Morning in the tenement brings the daily scramble, shoes mismatched, bread crust for breakfast, and an anxious search for your one good pencil. School is just a few blocks away, the walk punctuated by puddles, the calls of street vendors, and the herding of younger siblings who'd rather explore the alley than face another day of spelling drills. Still, you go, because school offers warmth, company, and a chance to escape the clatter and grind of the factory, if only for a few hours. The building itself looks more like a warehouse than a temple of learning. High windows streaked with soot, wooden floors that creak with every step, and a mysterious draft that seems to target your ankles no matter where you sit. The bell rings, loud and stern, and you shuffle in, eyes on the floorboards, ears peeled for the teacher's sharp voice. Seating is determined by a subtle calculus. Fastest kids in front, troublemakers in the back, everyone else scattered wherever there's space. Your teacher is a character, part disciplinarian, part philosopher, sometimes barely a step ahead of the lesson plan. You suspect she can read. She certainly corrects your spelling with enough enthusiasm. But there are rumors among the older kids that last year's teacher left after someone challenged him to add 3 numbers together in public. No matter. The lessons go on, reciting the alphabet, chanting multiplication tables, copying moral maxims about hard work and obedience onto tiny slates. Chalk dust fills the air, settling onto cuffs, collars, and, inevitably, your lunch. Textbooks are shared and battered, their pages annotated by generations of hopeful scholars, and the occasional doodler with a sense of humor. History lessons mean listening to stories about ancient Greeks, brave Americans, and that one time the river froze so solid you could walk to Brooklyn without getting your shoes wet. No one has ever verified this. Sometimes, the teacher reads aloud, her voice softening as she describes far-off places and impossible inventions. You stare out the window and imagine a world where school lasts all day and no one expects you to run a bobbin-winding machine for a living. Of course, there's the small matter of lice. They are the true rulers of the classroom, hitching rides from hat to hat, making themselves known. Just as the spelling bee heats up, you scratch, your neighbor scratches, and the teacher sighs, setting aside her lesson to line everyone up for a good combing. There are rumors that soap, vinegar, and even prayer have been tried as remedies. But so far, nothing can outlast a determined louse and a crowded cloakroom. Recess is freedom, 15 minutes of pure, glorious chaos. You race outside, breath steaming in the winter air, shoes sliding in the mud. The games are simple. Tag, marbles, a competitive round of who can find the least dead pigeon. Arguments break out, alliances form, and before you know it, the bell rings you back inside. Hair messier, heart lighter. School is a world apart, a place where you learn, dream, and, occasionally, nap with your eyes open. It's not perfect, but it's yours. You carve your initials into a desk, memorize a poem, and hope that someday, with enough lessons and luck, you might spell your way out of poverty and into something bigger. In the Gilded Age, school means hope, however drafty, crowded, and itchy it might be. And sometimes, that hope is enough to keep you coming back, slate in hand and dreams in tow. In the tenement, your neighbors are closer than family and, occasionally, louder than a train whistle. There's old Mrs. Hennessy, who swears in 5 languages, the mysterious man in 4C who may be hiding a circus, and the kids upstairs who appear to be practicing for a future in demolition. You know everyone's secrets and everyone knows yours, mostly because the walls are thinner than your patience. Privacy in the tenement is a myth, a nice idea, like clean air or uncracked eggs. The building hums with life, every creak and stomp traveling up and down the stairs like gossip on a mission. You wake to the sound of Mrs. Hennessy's morning tirade, an impressive burst of creativity in both language and volume. It's strangely reassuring, like a rooster's crow. If the rooster had opinions about the price of bread and the mayor's moral character, the days are filled with a rolling cast of characters. You pass Mr. Levy in the hall, his glasses fogged up and arms full of library books he swears he'll read one day. He always has a story, usually involving famous rabbis, wild horses, or both. The woman across the hall, Miss Calderone, operates a tailoring business from her kitchen, and at least twice a month someone mistakes her apartment for a haberdashery and leaves with a new button sewn onto their coat. The children upstairs, collectively known as the O'Malley Horde, are a natural disaster in suspenders. You've learned to tell time by the thud of their footsteps. 7 a.m., thunderous running, 4 p.m., competitive furniture rearrangement. On weekends, the floorboards vibrate with the unmistakable rhythm of potato sack races, improvised wrestling matches, and, occasionally, a tuba solo from young Patrick, whose musical ambitions outpace both his skill and your tolerance. No one in the building has any secrets for long. If you run out of sugar, someone knows before you finish boiling the water. If you're sick, Mrs. Kowalski brings soup before you have time to complain. And Mr. Romano offers unsolicited medical advice that mostly involves garlic. Lost socks, broken locks, and petty squabbles are all public knowledge. It's impossible to keep anything quiet, especially with Mrs. Hennessy ears tuned for scandal and her window always open. Of course, not every neighbor is a delight. Some are chronic door slammers, expert stairway blockers, or enthusiastic early morning singers. There's the mysterious man in 4C, rarely seen, always heard, whose apartment occasionally emits animal noises or the smell of burnt feathers. Rumor has it he's a retired circus performer, though no one's ever seen so much as a juggling ball. Your grandmother claims he keeps a monkey. Your father says it's just bad plumbing. The best part about tenement neighbors is the impromptu community events. Hallway cleaning parties, usually triggered by an escaped mouse. Sing-alongs that happen whenever someone finds a working accordion, and mass evacuations during fire drills, real or imagined. On holidays, everyone brings their best dish to the landing. A riot of flavors and competition for whose stew can stand up without a spoon. Annoyances are balanced by acts of kindness. babysitting in a pinch, sharing a hot kettle, lending a coat or a coin when times get tough. Arguments rarely last longer than the next emergency. And apologies are often delivered in the form of fresh rolls or quietly fixed leaky pipes. At night, the building settles into a familiar din, snoring, the clink of teacups, laughter rising through the floorboards, and Mrs. Hennessy singing lullabies that sound suspiciously like Irish drinking songs. You fall asleep knowing exactly who lives above, below, and beside you, comforted by the chaos and connection of so many lives stacked together. In the Gilded Age tenement, neighbors are impossible to ignore, occasionally impossible to love, but always impossible to live without. They are your witnesses, your rescuers, and sometimes the reason you dream of moving to a deserted island. So tonight, as you settle deeper into the warmth of your real, modern bed, the one without springs poking you in the spine or a landlord pounding on your door, you can let out a long sigh of gratitude. Because after surviving a full day in the Gilded Age, even in imagination, you've earned it. The tenements, the factory shifts, the questionable soup, the rats with entrepreneurial spirits, somehow, you made it through all of it. And not everyone back then could say the same. You walked cobblestone streets filled with noise and dreams. You dodged horse carts, illness, rising rent, and that one neighbor who probably should have been a character witness in a crime novel. You worked until your hands ached. You washed in water colder than your boss's heart. And you slept in a room full of people you didn't choose and sounds you didn't want to identify. And still somehow people in the Gilded Age laughed, persevered, celebrated, and held on to hope with both hands, even when one of those hands was missing a finger from an industrial accident. The poor of the Gilded Age were resilient in ways that bend the to imagination. They built communities out of cramped hallways, futures out of long odds, and joy